could give us a brief overview of your own experience.
Sure. Well, what happened was at the time I was trying sort of a variant of the CE5 meditation. I was really wanting to meet, the entities, and that's what I was hoping for. And so what wound up, I did this for maybe a couple of weeks, and I used to meditate when I was younger. And so I was used to doing, you have the mandala, and you find a focal point, and you send your thoughts there. So I had been doing this for about a couple weeks, and what I was sending out, I really didn't have a particular target. Right. I was just sending it out to aliens in general. and I was naive. I mean, what can I say? And I was saying, well, I really want to meet you. I want to see a flying saucer, and you can even abduct me if you want. That's okay. You can have my DNA. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Maybe the wrong choice of words.
I know. But I'll tell you, I just kind of, I wasn't really taking it all that seriously. I didn't think it was going to work. And it was maybe around midnight. I'd been a field investigator for about 6 or 7 months at this point. And I just closed a case, which was an IFO. Somebody saw a star-shaped balloon. And I went upstairs, and I was getting my pillows behind my back. I have kind of a little ritual. I have a bad back. So I sort of like to get into a semi-recumbent position, almost like a lounge chair when you lay it back, right? So I had kind of gotten things set there when I noticed that our room had become strangely quiet, and that there was a light in our room that there was no source for. We had a problem with crickets in our rafters, and this was maybe the first time that I ever heard perfect silence in our room. There were no crickets. You couldn't hear any external traffic. This was in Burbank, California, not a rural area. Not rural.
Silence is not something that you're
hard to come by.
Gonna get.
No. So my wife was asleep, but I felt this weird, strange sense of calm. And that's very weird, because I know that light it's photons. It comes from a source. It's waves or particles, whichever the scientist happens to be expecting to look at the time.
That's right.
Yes. And I realized I could move, and that's when I guess I started feeling afraid. Now the center of our room, there was a bathroom on the left. There was our clothes closet on the right, and we had a little corner there where we had the TV sequestered. Well, what happened was impossible, because in front of the TV, in front of that area of the wall, it was as though like a little sepia, sort of yellowish brown colored spiral started spinning around, like the wall was spinning, about a 7-foot across aperture. Now it started lightening center, and it was going out to the edges. Like the way I usually describe it is as if you had poured some cream into a cup of coffee, and it seemed to spread from the center out to the edges. And it was like this little spiral galaxy that I was looking at, but no stars. It was just sort of, what had been sepia colored had turned like to light. It was just bright light. Well, this opened up, and all I could see was distance, and there was somebody standing off to the side, like the size of maybe a short human. But I couldn't really see any features on him because the light was coming from behind him. He was backlit. At this point, I'm really, really scared. I'm freaking out. I'm glad that I went to use the restroom before I went to bed. Is all I can say.
Yeah.
It probably would have been a mess. So anyway, it was as though somebody had drawn these 4 little creatures up to the foot of my bed. There were 2 on the right. There were 2 on the left. My my sense of logic still recoils at this whole thing because it doesn't make any sense. They didn't walk up to me. They didn't fly. It was as though they were pulled up on a rug, or like maybe they were like a millimeter off the ground, uh, levitated over to where I was. They would not communicate with me. I was trying to communicate with them. And this is what I thought. I thought, well, if I can just get them to communicate with me. But they were all business. They weren't talking with me, and they treated me kind of clinically, or like you'd treat I guess you'd treat a zoo animal. Or I mean, we don't really try to talk to lions or wolves or anything when we tag them in the wild. If it's an endangered species, we'll we'll tranquilize them, we'll tag them, and we'll take blood, and then we'll let them wake up. Well, I think that's kind of what happened with me. Is they took blood from me, and it felt like they took energy. I felt like it was life force that was being taken from me. Now, it may have just been massive amounts of blood that they took. I spoke with one friend of mine who's an official, and I mentioned, well, they didn't really take DNA from me. It's not like they took a sperm sample or anything. Right. And she was saying, well, what do you think blood is? That's the purest form of DNA that you can take. They did take your DNA. That's exactly, you asked them to, and that's what they took,
Right.
But I feel like they didn't hold up their side of the bargain. I never saw a spaceship. There was no room between our house and our neighbor's house to park a spaceship. It was like 10 feet. But, so it had to have been an interdimensional, thing that they did, like a wormhole or Einstein-Rosen bridge or something like that they created. Wow. And so they did this, and I'm screaming inside, and I'm not getting any answers back. And the tubes they had connected to me, I'm not sure if it was my upper chest or my upper arms, because I honestly couldn't see. I couldn't move my neck to look down, but it seemed like there were like 4 tubes, and there were a couple that are on my legs, and they unraveled and went back through the hole in the wall. This sounds crazy. That still sounds crazy to me. Somebody else was telling me the story, and I had not gone through something like this. I would probably have trouble believing it.
Right.
But it happened.
Wow.
They pulled back the same way that they came in. They went backwards. They didn't walk. They didn't turn around. They kept staring at me with the black eyes. There's something hypnotic about their eyes. There's that old poem, careful that you stare into the abyss, and lest it stare into you, right? And that's kind of how it felt. The wall closed up the same way that it had opened up. The room stayed kind of lit up for a while, but it slowly dimmed, and it seemed like as the light dimmed, and it was kind of a blue light, as the light dimmed, I could start moving. And as soon as I could move my mouth, I'm like yelling and screaming and shaking my wife. And I already told you that part of the story.
Yeah.
So, but she was not happy about it. I think that for myself, it changed my life. It changed the way that I looked at everything. If I had a question whether this was real or not, or if my mom was just spouting disinformation or something, no, it's that you can never ever look at this phenomenon in the same way once it becomes personal to you, when you've had your own experience. It's like, Tom, like when you saw your black triangle, it went from something that could be, that was on X-Files or whatever, to reality. You know that is a real thing, evading the laws of gravity. And this just evaded all the laws of natural order that I'm a scientific guy. I worked in the nursing field, and I had to take chemistry and I had to know, and I was an amateur astronomer when I was a kid, but it just changed everything. It changed the way that I look at everything, and I feel like I was meant to be doing what I'm doing. After this happened, I was really confused. My wife didn't believe me at first, and then 2 nights later, she had the same thing happen to her.
Oh my!
And she was the one that was shaking me. She was shaking me, And she was like pacing back and forth saying, oh my God, you need to tell your little friends they need to leave us the F alone. I didn't sign up for this stuff. And then 2 nights after that, we both had an experience, not with entities, but our room was lit up again, but this time it was coming from over our house as well. And we both ran to the window and we opened the little blinders that we had there, and you couldn't see the object that was shining light down on our house, but it was like God's own floodlight. Neighbors' porch lights were going on, and we couldn't see the object. It was either obfuscated or else hidden by the roof of our house. But that was why we call it our weird week, and it really changed everything in my life. And I'm glad. I mean, I'm not happy that my wife went through something similar, because it is kind of, it's I mean, people call it abduction for a reason. It's not, and now in my case, I gave them permission, right? I asked them for it.
You did.
All right. I did. I mean, I gave them a more or less an invitation, but my wife didn't.
And a beacon.
Yeah. And she never had like a real interest in this stuff, but she's sort of, it's become part of her life, whether she liked it or not. There it is. Right. Now she knows it's real. She doesn't like to talk about it, but if somebody starts saying that it's a bunch of bunk or something, you'll watch her. She's like Mama Lion. She's in there, going, well, what do you know?
Well, what do you say? What do you say to people that think or believe that these abductions are some sort of response from the brain to kind of hide or cloak something that like a traumatic experience?
I mean, I didn't have a traumatic experience happen, and I mean, there's nothing traumatic about that evening at all. It just happened.
Aside from
I understand why psychologists and certain people that don't want to accept this phenomenon would go there. It makes sense. I kind of thought that way for a long time about it myself. I thought that maybe it was hiding a, child molestation or something like that.
Right.
But when it happens to you, know that that's not what it is. And I keep on hearing the same story from people over and over and over again. That's similar to my own. I mean, they're all different. Okay. Everybody's experience, they're unique in their own experience. And I certainly don't bundle them all up into categories, but, there are certain markers that we see from case to case to case. I mean, the familial thing where it runs in families, the bloodline stuff, certain marks that people are sometimes left with, like little triangular marks. There are just so many different things.